Hi, my name is Lola Kimadi. I am a visual storyteller and travel photographer. I am originally from Nigeria, based in Stockholm, Sweden, and I am excited to be here with Just for Women Europe.
This is Just Women Europe, connecting women across borders. Can you tell us about your journey from your early life to becoming an international recognized travel writer and photographer?
So my journey towards what I do today hasn't been very linear. I grew up in Nigeria, and geography was always my favorite subject. And so when I left home around 15 to go start college, I actually went into IT. And so for many years, I was a programmer, system architect, but geography had always been my first love. Writing had always been my first love. And so it wasn't until I volunteered with an expedition race as a travel writer that I realized I think this might be the path for me. So when I came back from that experience, I started plotting the way I was going to leave IT to do this full time. And so that was how I got into travel writing. And then with the photography, I am an oil painter. I used to do it a lot more in the past. And so when I traveled, I took photos that I was going to paint when I got back home, and then started realizing I was duplicating efforts, and then switched into photography. And then how I got into writing novels was because back home in secondary school, I used to write a lot of short stories. So that love for fiction had always been there, writing, creating these worlds and imagining what people did in different parts of the world. And so it's been a joy and a blessing to be able to return to that love.
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced when building a career in a male dominated industry, especially as a Black woman?
First of all, I always get this when somebody looks at my photos, they say, "Oh, did you take that?" Yes, I did. But when they see my male white colleagues' portfolio, they're like, "Oh, it's so amazing," even though our portfolio is comparable or maybe I'm even stronger. And so one of the things that I had to face, especially early on in my career, was not only convincing photo editors at these magazines that, yes, I can work on this assignment, I can do the exact same job, maybe even better, but then also fighting the stereotype of what a travel photographer should look like. Because in the industry, now it's a lot more diverse, but in the beginning, it was travel photographers looked like, white guys that climbed Mount Everest and then came back to go model for GQ. And then I show up as the travel photographer, right? So breaking those stereotypes and showing that we need to diversify who tells the story of a place, who brings back the image from a place. Because as an African, I see the world differently than somebody else. So that was a lot of what I had to fight in the beginning, was not only proving that my work was on par, maybe even stronger in many aspects, but then fighting the stereotype of what a travel photographer was supposed to look like.
You have traveled to many countries and cultures. What is the biggest lesson travel has taught you about humanity?
I think the biggest lesson, and which is what I take into every work I do, is everybody just wants to be seen and acknowledged for who they already are, right? So people just want to be seen. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you listen to me? Am I worthy? And so, regardless of where I go, that is kind of the fundamental human need. It's just to be seen and to be seen as enough without having to be anything else or bring qualifications or bring, status. It's just, am I enough and do you see me? And so that's one of the things that's been really empowering and insightful in the work I do.
You played in Division 1 and Division 2 rugby during your school years. What drew you to rugby? And what did the sport teach you that has influenced your life and career?
I actually played rugby um, a little bit in college and then for many years outside of college. So I first started intervarsity rugby when I was in my undergrad. And then after that, for over 10 years, actually played competitive rugby for like a city's team, you know, um, Division 1 and Division 2. And one of the great things about rugby is it is the most diverse sport in terms of position, body type that you can play. So if you look at a rugby squad, if you are short, there's a position for you. If you're muscular, there's a position for you. If you're tall, there's a position for you. If you're skinny, there's a position for you. It's the most diverse. And I can argue this, but it is the most diverse sport physically. And what playing in a rugby community taught me is you're already enough as you are because there is a space for you. And so all of that just ties into, what I learn as I travel, what I learn or write about in my work is you don't have to point thoughts and bend yourself and be who you're not because there's already a spot for you. There's already space for you as you are. And so that's one of the beauties of rugby and my rugby community. And that's my sport. Love that sport.
Do you plan on playing rugby again in the future?
When I left college and when I started playing rugby, I was in Dayton, Ohio. I moved from, Maryland to Dayton and I started the women's team. They are the men's team. I started the women's team there. Uh, we became Division 2, really highly ranked. And then at the end of my career, I moved to a Division 1 team. Division 1 team is where they pick players for the national team, right? And at some point I thought, once I moved to Sweden, I would continue on that path. But it's such a physically brutal, in the sense, sport, right? Like you get it. I call it like you have to combine the speed of a soccer player with the strength of an American football player without helmets and padding. So it's a very physically taxing sport. So if I ever went to rugby, it would probably be more as maybe a ref or, or like a coach or something along that lines. But I think right now I'm just happy being like a big supporter of the sport and having it as my community for life. But no, I don't see myself going back playing physically. So.
Do you think Africa is often misunderstood by international travelers and media?
All the time. And it's twofold, right? So in the past, there was a lot of or kind of this poverty image that kept being shown globally. And to counteract that, we're like, no, Africa is beautiful and diverse and see how rich and colorful. And then we then skewed to the very opposite end, showing mostly the affluence, right? And so a lot of the images people have been getting is either the stereotypical poverty image or the very, very affluent to counteract the poverty image. But a lot of beautiful stories can be found in the middle, right? So when we focus on the most amazing fashion designers, what about the people in the middle where they source their Ankara from, and the market women? There's so many beautiful, rich stories in there. And I think, Africa is often misunderstood from many angles. But what we want to show is kind of the diversity of stories to say the middle is also equally important to the fabric, when we're trying to counteract. So that's kind of how I see it, in that we shouldn't exclude some stories to counteract the whole narrative as well.
Who are some women who have inspired your own journey?
So there's so many. And like even just within the travel space, when I first moved in, I mean, there's a lady called Ellen Lee that wrote, I would say the first anthology called Black Women Travel Writers. They all wrote stories for that. So that kind of inspired me as well. There are so many amazing, women photographers. There is Camille Seaman, who focuses on the Arctic. But there's so many, to name. I mean, even my grandmother is such an inspiration. She's passed on now, but she was such an independent, fiercely independent woman that kind of just bucked tradition, saying that I don't need to be tied down to any person, any man, any place. And she lived her truth. So, yeah, so many inspirations. many.
How has working with organizations such as National Geographic, BBC, and CNN influenced your journey as a storyteller and journalist?
First of all, it's always a privilege to be published in any publication that's considered or that's revered, right? So absolutely, it's a privilege, and I'm grateful to have had those opportunities, and I still contribute to some of them. But also, it enlightened me into who gets to tell the story of a place, right? So when I look at the picture well of travel or just travel writers, photographers they have, a lot of their white photographers or writers can write about any place, right? They're allowed to go to Guinea-Bissau, they're allowed to go to Papua New Guinea and write and photograph.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Black photographers, we need to be focused on our own communities, right? We need to be focused on Africa. We need to be focused on the African American community. We are not allowed, and it's like unspoken to then say, you know what, I want to go write about the indigenous Sami in Sweden, but I'm Nigerian. Why can't I? I have expertise, whatever, So that is one of those things that I noticed, in the career is we're not given the range or space to actually be storytellers outside, of just specific communities. And that's what I've seen in lots of different places. And that's what I've fought against in my career is saying, I want to be known as a photographer, travel photographer that can photograph anything. Right? Versus say, oh, I must go specialize in a specific community. So those are some of the things that I learned. Kind of working is who gets to tell the story of a place who is given freer range to go bring back more diverse stories.
How do these organizations like the National Geographic, BBC, and CNN find you to work with them?
So there are many different ways. When I was starting out, I had no kind of experience, right? So I didn't have any publication credits or clips that we usually say, but I had audacity in space, right? So audacity says, you may not have the experience yet, but do you believe in the story you're trying to tell? And so with my very first publication credit was with BBC Africa, wrote the editors, sent a link to photos I had taken, was able to tell a story, say, I was home in Nigeria, la, la, la. And as I was waiting at this jetty, I saw kids coming in their school uniforms on canoes. And so I already had the story and photos to be able to tell the story, and I pitched. And I always say, what's the worst that could happen? Go with your email. The best that could happen, they say, this is interesting, tell me more. And so that's what happened in the beginning, right? And of course, as you start getting more of those responses, it continues to build confidence in your work. I think with National Geographic, how I got into that family was they had a platform called Your Shot where everybody can upload photos from around the world, every day. And the editors will pick their daily dozen, meaning these are the 12 we like the best. And my photos were picked 3 times out of thousands upon thousands, which made me then realize maybe I have a visual voice on my stories. There's a story that's coming through across. And so that's kind of how it all started, is not really preaching, but preaching audaciously, assuming what's the worst could happen, the ignorant, right? But if you don't take the shots, how could the best happen to you? And so that's what happened in the beginning, is adding a lot of audacity, saying, I don't care if it's BBC or National Geographic or Travel and Leisure, this is the story I wanted to tell. And the story is usually more important than the outlet. So
your book explore culture, belonging, and identity. What things are you most passionate about exploring?
Lots of different things, but I think the theme around identity is always one that's really interesting, right? Because identity is always super subjective based on environment. It evolves over time, right? But at the core, how is identity tied to your values? How is it tied to your sense of self-worth? How is it tied to different cultures? Are you adapting or are you assimilating? Are you integrating? Right? And so those are the things I like to explore in all my work, whether it's photography, whether it's travel writing, whether it's novels, whether it's nonfiction books, whatever, is um how can you stay the same regardless of the environment? And I think for me, kind of looking at my career, looking at my evolution as a person, I am the same in every single room, whether it's, with CEOs, whether it's chatting with market women, whether it is, doesn't matter. And I think for me, that is the greatest privilege to be able to um, found yourself that way, to be able to be the same in every single room. And that's why identity is something I talk about a lot in my work, so people can continue to feel and step into their own sense of identity and self in that way.
What does it mean to you to have your book translated into 18 languages, reaching readers across different cultures and countries?
I think it's an absolute privilege. I mean, just to even have a book published is a dream for anyone that wants to have a book published, and then to have the book, which is the Logon book, translated into so many languages is incredible. It means, in the future, somebody who speaks Korean is reading one of my books in Korean, and that's not something I'd never dreamt for myself. I knew that I wanted to be, like I said, geography has always been my subject. I knew I was going to be a storyteller in some form. I knew I was always going to travel, but never would I have dreamt that my work would be read by somebody halfway across the world in their own language, which is absolutely thrilling and humbling feeling. So,
What legacy do you hope to leave through your work?
and that's why I always look to Oprah Winfrey, right? As somebody who shows you how to just be yourself and be successful being yourself, right? And I think that's one of the things that she's done over her career is Oprah's always just shown up authentically in whatever she did in her career capacity. And so I think for my work, I want to show people that you can still be yourself. You can still show up fully because there's a reason why we're all uniquely made. You cannot, your purpose is to show up fully with all the gifts, that you've been given to share with the world. And so hopefully my work shows that, well, one, it makes people feel seen and validated and acknowledged to make them feel like, yes, they're enough, but also to show that you can be yourself regardless of role, regardless of context, regardless of situation. And that's a freedom that you can put a price on, where you don't have to feel like you have to always code switch based on an environment. That freedom you can't get anywhere.
What is something people will be surprised to learn about you?
I think people may not know, but I used to be a cartoonist as well. So I used to, yeah, I used to draw. And that is what something I'm thinking of actually reviving because it was called The Office Supplies. That was when I was working in IT. And so it was essentially all the items in the office were characters, like the staplers and the printers and they're always fighting and the paper and, printer is always fighting. The printer is like, I'm not printing anything more, I'm saving my ink and just cute little things. So I used to be a cartoonist. That's, I think, one thing people will find surprising, I guess.
How would you like people to remember your contribution to global storytelling?
What I would like people to remember is that she told her stories connected across race, orientation, religion, language, her stories were really human because she did not limit her storytelling to a specific community. She actually, I guess, she did the work of cultural connection. So I don't know, people will always remember what they want to remember, but I hope people will feel seen to the work, and hopefully my work make them feel vessels, because people, like they always say, they won't remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. So I think I hope people will remember that we made them feel seen through the work.
Thank you for watching Just for Women Europe.